Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Kade, and I've got the filmmakers behind Netflix's Amanda Knox. It's available on Netflix now and gives us the in-depth story of the Amanda Knox case. Check it out. Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Kade. All right, gentlemen, was just sharing my adoration for your documentary, Amanda Knox. I saw it the first night it came out. I remember when this whole case happened, I was on the Amanda Knox's guilty train, and then I was on the Amanda Knox's innocent train. Then I saw your documentary, and now I'm not sure. So I'm going to ask both of you, is Amanda Knox innocent or guilty? Tell me, you dug into it. What happened here?
Well, I think that, what we did with the film was to kind of work backwards from the final Supreme Court verdict, which declared Amanda Knox and Raphael Celestino innocent of the murder. And so what we tried to do, there's still kind of split opinion worldwide, and we wanted to really form the film around that final legal decision. So for us, that's the decision that we accept.
When you started digging into all this, you had probably a preconception going in, totally different ideas coming out. From start to finish, what were the differences for both of you?
I think what we saw going into it, of course, was that there was a narrative and a story that had been constructed on top of the objective facts and evidence that existed. And we were so caught up in that narrative and the way it was being presented to us and the way that we were consuming that nobody really actually knew what was going on or who these people were. So the first thing that we wanted to do was try to get beneath all of those headlines and understand who these people were and find the humanity at the heart of the story, no matter which side of the guilt or innocence aisle someone fell on.
One of the things I loved is you actually got Amanda to participate in the documentary, and it's pretty incredible to see her now. What's her whole recollection of this? When she looks back as she's involved in this project, what sense did you get from her looking back on this? How did she feel about it? What did she remember? What was going through her head?
Yeah, I think that, it's an 8-year-long story, and I think that each of the people in the film, Amanda, Raffaele, Giuliano Menini, Nick Pisa, they all changed a lot over the course of those 8 years. And I think you can actually see with Amanda, there's footage of her from when she was 20 and going to Italy in the film.
It looks totally different. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think that, it's important to remember that the lives of these people have been fundamentally changed by these 8 years, that, there was a lot of entertaining twists and turns for the kind of us as the outside world, but the people that were at the center of it were really, really affected by it. And that was something we wanted to kind of portray in the film. And of course, you see Meredith Kercher's mother at the end of the film, and she still doesn't really feel like she has closure. And so I think it's just important to remember, the real human cost to a story like this. It may seem entertaining on the surface, but there are real people behind it.
It's fascinating because I think you guys did such an incredible job of staying unbiased and really presenting both sides of the story here. But on so many different occasions while watching this, I thought to myself, boy, the Italian police are really pressing this case when they probably shouldn't be pressing it. Did you have that same feeling as you're digging into it? Was it they needed to find a scapegoat? They needed to make a case here to save face at a certain level?
Well, as Nick Pisa, the journalist in the film, notes, they were under a great deal of pressure to solve this crime because, the international media descended on this rural town and wanted answers. But I think past that, too, we found that that there's a point of view that everyone had in the way that they were approaching these people or the story or the investigation. And you can see that how those opposing points of view really influenced the way that the narrative became set in place. So with Giuliano Menini, yes, he's an older man from this provincial town. He's Roman Catholic.
Straight out of a movie, that guy, by the way. He's like straight out of Central Casting.
There are a lot of people in the world, that probably that might hold, beliefs that he does or see the world the way that he does. But at the same time, you can see how Amanda saw the world, right? She wanted, to go to Italy and find romance and food and drink wine.
Like
and
the
ruins.
stereotypical.
So they both had these stereotypes that they were using to access the other people or understand the other people. And then you can see when they state those, how they would come to clashes or come to blows.
Okay, so I still can't figure out her behavior after this whole situation. That's what I walked away from this and I thought, you know what, I think she's innocent. But I can never reconcile, why was she so weird after the murders? Like, did you guys ask yourself that? Could you figure out what the answer was?
Well, I think that for us, that question was really the one that kind of became central to the whole story. And for us, what we were actually curious about is, why are we analyzing behavior in that way? What does the behavior actually tell us? And so I think at the end of the day, we're kind of believers that, the analysis of behavior, everyone behaves totally differently. How would you behave in that situation? You don't actually know. We all kind of have ideas of how we would behave, but I don't think that we know how we would actually respond to that
but
sort of
hers
pressure.
was so different, so strange. I mean, did you guys, when you're talking to her, did she have an explanation for it, or is she just like, I have no idea, here's what happened?
I mean, she says in the film, she'd been dating this guy for a week, and they were kind of falling in love with each other, and then this terrible, terrible thing happens. And she's thrown into this incredible international sensation that captures the entire world. And I would imagine that it was an overwhelming experience for everyone. She says in the opening title sequence of the film, Diane Sawyer kind of asks her about this behavior question, and she says, well, people respond to things differently. And I think we're believers in that as well, in that look at the spectrum of kind of opinions on her behavior. A lot of people look at her kissing her boyfriend outside the crime scene and say, well, she's getting comforted. A lot of people look at her kissing the boyfriend outside the crime scene and, like Juliana Manini, think that behavior is inappropriate. So there's so many different ways to look at behavior, even beyond the behavior itself. And we found that like a really interesting human kind of dilemma.
So she becomes an international name because of this case. You get the sense from watching this documentary that she wants to fade back into obscurity and live a normal life. Will she ever be able to do that?
Well, I think it's important to remember that none of these people asked to be in this position, right? They had this thing happen to them across the board, whether it was the Kircher family and Meredith Kircher, having to deal with the tragic death of their daughter, or Giuliano Manini on the streets of Perugia being called evil. All of them are kind of caught up in this, and it will define them forever. And yet it's tragic across the board in that way, because now they've had their lives taken from them, they've had identities created for them, and they've were turned into entertainment. And I think we're hoping that people watch this film and maybe consider the role that we all have in commodifying tragedy, ourselves included, for making a film, and really consider that these are human beings that have kind of been used up and turned into, clickbait headlines for the entertainment of people at what cost?
Do people look at her differently on the street? When people encounter her, obviously the name Amanda Knox. She'll never be able to escape that. But what's people's reaction to her?
Well, Amanda says in the film, she goes to the grocery store sometimes, and people stare at her and say, "Oh, it's you," and her kind of response to that is, "Yeah, it's me, and you don't know me." And we thought that was a really interesting thing, and it kind of gets to the heart of when someone's on the front page, when their picture is published in the newspaper. It doesn't actually mean that we know really anything about them. And so I think that's something that she's grappling with, is every time someone recognizes her, they're recognizing her for something that she doesn't really want to be recognized for. And that's a tough thing to deal with, I think, for any person, and certainly extends to Giuliana Manini as well.
So you look at this case and you look at the movie. What do you hope people take away from this overall situation when they see Amanda Knox?
Yeah, I think that hopefully we can kind of generate a conversation. The film, we don't really consider it a true crime film. We really like to think of it as kind of an investigation into human behavior in the way that we all love narrative. We really want to hook on. We're kind of addicted to it. We're waiting for the next jolt of a good story. And I think that what happens when you get really invested in that is you lose track of kind of the facts, the information. You become kind of a low information person, an ADD person, and that's what we all are turning into. So we really see this as kind of a story about modern culture, and hopefully an investigation of that.
Was she hesitant to get involved at first, or was she?
Yeah.
As I'm watching this, I'm like, it must have been so difficult, to get her on board, but to get the victim's parents on board. I mean, how did you guys go through this process? You decide, all right, I'm going to make this movie. Yeah. Then where?
Well, we told everyone the type of film that we wanted to make. We wanted to make a film about the human experience of being inside of this snow globe, right? Having the world kind of shaking you up and, tossing you around time and time again. And, we should note as well that we did reach out to the Kircher family several times, and they never told us one way or the other if they wanted to participate, but it was still important for us to include them in the film, which we did through archive and, the press conferences that they held. But, when we approached everyone, we said, we want to let you tell your story story in your own words. And we also were very hands-off in that way, and we let everybody decide when they were ready to talk. It took Amanda 2 years to decide that she was ready to speak to us, and it took Giuliano Manini 4.5 years to decide that he was ready to tell his version of the truth. And we said, we'll be here when you'd like to talk to us. We'll be ready to listen.
Does the movie not happen? So let's say Giuliano doesn't come back and say, I don't want to do this. Does the movie not happen then, or do you move forward without him?
No, we really kind of decided from the beginning that we wanted to have both sides in the film. And so, even after we interviewed Amanda for the first time, we weren't actually sure we were going to make a film. We kind of did it. We did a first interview with her, and then we went off and tried to, get the other side. And so I think making a documentary, the entire time you're making it, you're not quite sure, is it going to end up being a finished film at the end of the day? So it wasn't until 2015 when we interviewed Manini for the first time that we kind of knew we had a film. And that was when we went to Netflix with the film.
Did I come back to my first question? You'll never tell me whether you believe she's innocent or guilty, but did you come away with a conclusion in your own head after delving about as deep into this as you could possibly delve?
Sure. I'm not sure if it's applicable. I don't know if people are going to watch this interview in connection with the election that just happened in our country. But I do think, for us, maybe as individuals, I don't want to speak for Brian, but I'm interested in fact and not in feeling. So it's very hard to answer that question because we respect the Italian legal conclusion that acquitted Amanda and Raffaele of the crimes and the charges. And so I'm not gonna unpack something based on how I feel, because as a human being, I want to access things based on information and truth.
If the Italian Supreme Court would have reversed and found her guilty, do you think she would have gone back? Would she have had to go? What would have been the legal ramifications? Would she have had to return? Would she have fought it? What happens from there?
Well, there was a big discussion about whether Italy would try to extradite her from the U.S. So that would have been the next step in the legal proceeding. Was the Italian court system would have had a choice, essentially, to ask the United States for extradition or to kind of just stop there. Raffaele Sollecito was really he was the one who would have gone straight back to prison. And so it was a very stressful period for him and his family right around the final verdict because, in fact, I think the police were actually waiting outside of his house had he been found guilty to
Poor
take him
kid.
back.
If he was innocent, poor kid.
Yeah. So, in other words, the story would have really gone on for quite a while on the legal side had the extradition, had they been found guilty, and then had the extradition request been submitted, it would have gone to the State Department and then to the U.S. court system.
I've asked all about Amanda, but what about Raphael? What has his life been like since this case?
Yeah.
We're actually glad you brought that up because I think, the story was made to be about Amanda Knox. So everyone else living inside of this has largely been forgotten.
He's the forgotten character in this story.
Raffaele Sollecito has been forgotten, but so has Meredith Kercher, right? The story became about Amanda Knox in the way that it was presented to us. But there are many other people who have been ruined or have been affected by this story. And we hope that when people watch this film, they consider that these are all very real people. They're not just characters that we can kind of use as entertainment, for our clicking and viewing pleasure.
And Raphael, he started an internet company in his hometown. He consults actually for television in Italy on kind of true crime stories.
I love that when we see that in the epilogue.
And I think he, like everyone in this story, he's trying to adjust now, being back in the real world and no longer having this hanging over him. And so, just like Amanda, I think they're trying to rebuild their lives, and they will be for quite some time.
Congratulations, guys. I really enjoyed it. I remember when this case was happening, it was like the international O.J. Simpson trial, and it was really cool to see the inside story of essentially what happened. But getting Amanda was a total coup because we get to really see inside her head and what has happened and looking back how it's affected her. So congrats on a great project.
Thank you so
much.